on, everybody? Thank you so much for coming back to another video. And in today's video, we are talking about Pokemon Detective Pikachu. So yes, guys, this is the first ever live-action Pokemon film ever made, ever put to screen, and I've got to say, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a fun film, and I think as a Pokemon fan, and having grown up just really wanting to see a live-action Pokemon movie, I was thoroughly entertained, and I did enjoy a lot about this movie. Now, before I get too deep into this review, I do want to share the fact that I grew up as a Pokemon fan, but I am not some sort of over-the-top, super knowledgeable Pokemon fan. You know, there's definitely some people who take it a lot more seriously than I do. I'm that way more with Star Wars and Marvel and DC, but when it comes to Pokemon, I'm very well versed. I've played majority of the video games ever since I was a kid, back from the N64 Game Boy days till now. I think I've only not played like one handheld game, and there's some of the newer games on some of the like consoles like Switch that I have not played. But for the most part, I am very well versed when it comes to Pokemon as far as the games, playing the card games growing up, and also watching the anime series as I grew up. I've just always genuinely loved this franchise. It always has a special place in my heart, and I'm sure it's the same thing for a lot of you guys. So I'm sure the question that you guys are all really caring about while watching this is the movie good? I think the answer to that is just a clean and solid yes. I think this is a beautiful looking film. You can tell a lot of attention went into making sure that this film looked and felt like a Pokemon film, and I think that it does that perfectly. I think the movie very much feels and looks like a Pokemon movie. You know, it brings a lot of that excitement and that charm that Pokemon has, and I can definitely tell you that it pays off in that way. It was super awesome to see certain Pokemon brought to the big screen, and not only the big screen, but brought to life in a live action format with really good CGI. This is a movie that doesn't take itself too seriously while also giving us a more grounded approach to the Pokemon world and lore. But you know, like I mentioned, they don't take it too seriously, and that's something I really enjoy. There's still that cartoony look and feel and vibe to a lot of the Pokemon and characters, and the communication in this film and the overall feel of this movie feels very much in line with that cheesy, over-the-top, just silliness that Pokemon has always had, while also bringing a new approach to it. But for the most part, I could tell you that if you are a fan of Pokemon and you do like that campiness and that over-the-topness and the silliness and the very cartoony look to things, this movie definitely delivers on that in a new and exciting way. The color palette of this film is really well done. There were so many shots that I thought were executed so well. The CG on all the Pokemon are really well done, and I really did enjoy how a lot of them looked. Even though some of them may have been very cartoony and very cheesy looking, I think that's definitely what they were going for, and I really enjoy that this film has a very consistent look and feel throughout the entirety of the film. I really enjoyed Ryan Reynolds as Detective Pikachu in this movie. You know, he brought a lot of charm and cuteness, and overall, Pikachu was just a cute and exciting character. I was never really bored while he was on screen, and Ryan Reynolds voicing him definitely just heightened the whole experience, and you know, it definitely felt a little Deadpool-y at times, but you know, a little more family friendly, a little more silly. Some of the quippiness and some of the little moments of dialogue and jokes definitely felt very much like a lighthearted, friendly Deadpool, and you know, I like that. Some people, you know, thought that that's kind of what they were going for when the first trailer released, that they were kind of maybe stealing the humor from Deadpool and kind of implementing it in this in a more kid-friendly way. And I can say in a lot of ways there are some of those feelings throughout this film. For the most part, I feel like Ryan Reynolds plays a brand new character, and you can feel it's a different character and a different narrative in this. He's not trying to do Deadpool, but Ryan Reynolds is Deadpool, so when he is trying to be comedic and do his quippy thing that Ryan Reynolds is known for, it just falls in line with what we all kind of think of as Deadpool now. But I really enjoyed him as Pikachu, and so that's definitely one of the biggest pluses I can give this film outside of the look and feel of this film. Now, like I mentioned, I think this is a good movie. I think it's an entertaining movie, but I do not think it's a great film, and I also don't feel like it's the most compelling narrative that we could have gotten with the story. The movie has a very basic and straightforward narrative that's very easy to follow. You have A, B, and C, and you know, you kind of can predict what's going to happen in this film is a really big thing that I could say about this movie. It's not super groundbreaking as far as the narrative. There are some twists and turns in there, and one specifically at the very end that I didn't really expect when I was watching the film that I really enjoyed. But for the most part, majority of the twists and turns for me were a little bit predictable. I think that the narrative isn't really set up to be like this really compelling story. I think it's a fun adventure, and you can really follow it and have a good time with it, and just kind of just shut your mind off for a while. It's that kind of movie, you know, eat some popcorn and watch some Pokemon on screen, and just if you're a fan of this franchise, you're going to get a lot out of it. Just being able to see some of the shots where there's just a random Pokemon on the very back walking around with a random human, and you just, as a Pokemon fan, you can't help but feel happy to just see this world fleshed out in a live action format, and it's done so well that it's hard to dislike the film for its narrative flaws. I do wish I was more attached to the characters and what was happening. I can definitely say that I didn't have that emotional gripping to a lot of the situations and storylines that happened with a lot of the characters in the movie. A lot of the characters, if not most of the characters in this film, for me, were forgettable. They were just kind of there to be there, and they served their purpose. But for the most part, the main character, who I cannot remember the actor's name right now, you know, he was really the core of this story. And I would actually go on and say that Pikachu was the actual core and heart of the story, even though the main character was played by this other kid. I can't remember his name. I'll make sure to put the words right here. Probably should have looked it up beforehand, but I'm just shooting this review as soon as I pulled up and just got here to my house. I'm here in the driveway, and I just decided I'm just going to shoot this review right now while everything is fresh on my mind and I have plenty to spit out about this film. So let's talk a little bit about the main actor, actually. I enjoyed him in this film. I think that, you know, I definitely enjoyed him a lot more in this film than I did in Jurassic Park. If you do not remember, he was in Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, the last Jurassic Park film to come out. And in that movie, I was not the biggest fan of him. You know, I think it had a lot more to do with his writing. He was just the guy who was in this really shitty situation that was there to scream and be wild, and just like every time a big dinosaur would come, he would just scream at the highest pitch that he could. And he was just that kind of comedic relief, and I don't mind that in characters. You know, you can have plenty of characters that can be funny in that way, where their humor is based on them just being this over-exaggerative, just whiny crybaby. But his character really didn't have much more to offer you in Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, so I wasn't a huge fan of him. And so leading up to this movie, I remember when I heard the casting, I was kind of... you know, I was kind of not, you know, I didn't know how I felt about it. I didn't know how I felt about it. And, you know, I just felt like, is that really what they're going to go with the first ever live action Pokemon movie? And what I can say is that I genuinely appreciated his performance in this movie, and I liked it a lot more. He was a lot more believable, and he actually played a character that you could feel for at times. He was a bit of an ass at times, and you could definitely, there was times where, you know, he was a conflicted character, and I felt like that added to the complexity of his character and his overall arc. But there was a lot of moments where he was just kind of dumb, and he was just kind of stumbling his way through situations in this movie, and I think that's kind of where I struggle with this movie is the writing. I think the writing, you know, definitely tells a cohesive narrative that you can follow, and you won't be lost while you're watching it. But again, it's predictable at times. A lot of the other characters don't matter. When there's payoff to certain situations near the end of the film for other characters that are not the main character and Pikachu, you don't really care too much. You know, you know, you can kind of sympathize with them and be like, oh, you know, they were able to, this was able to happen to them, and oh, you know, good for them, this came full circle, you know, all right, cool. But you don't really feel anything in your heart for those characters. And so what I could say for the most part is that the strength of this film is the chemistry between the main character Tim and Pikachu. For sure, 110% is the chemistry between them. That's the strongest part of this film, 100%. Outside of that, the visuals, the look, the action, the overall, just the spectacle of being in the live action Pokemon world that, from what I understood in this film, is still in universe of the other Pokemon material we've gotten in the past. They made a reference at one point to a previous, you know, big storyline in a Pokemon film. I won't get into that right now. I'm very curious to see what you guys think if you guys have seen the film. But I do believe after watching this, even though it's its own universe and it's its own live action thing, that it almost feels like they were kind of hinting at the fact that this is a live action version of Pokemon, but inside of the universe of Pokemon that we all already know. And one thing that I really enjoyed about this film that I told my girlfriend Haley as we were walking out of the film that I was really happy they didn't do was they didn't shoehorn in any cameos from any characters from previous installments or games, or any like recognizable things just for the sake of them being in the film. You know, there was no moment where somebody walks up and it's like, hey, I'm Ash Ketchum. You know what I mean? Like, it didn't happen. You know what I mean? So that's something that I really enjoy, that this was very much its own thing, able to tell its own story with its own characters. And it's also a really good place for people who are not fans of Pokemon to step in. You know, I think if you've always seen Pokemon as like a silly thing for kids, or, you know, even as an adult, like if you've seen maybe your kids played with it when they grew up, and it's like, oh, Pika Pika, a little, you know, animated show, the anime, you know, card game, you always just thought of it as a silly little thing. What I can say is this film does an incredible job of being a great movie that just takes the source material of Pokemon and elevates it, while also being a great place for people who are not fans of Pokemon to step in, enjoy the story, and understand the universe. I think anybody who's a fan of sci-fi or fantasy or even just cute animals can really watch this movie, and maybe they're not a Pokemon fan, and really appreciate this universe and get a better understanding of why people may enjoy Pokemon and this universe as an overall. I think this film did that job very well. I think it does a good job of balancing a film for Pokemon fans as well as a film for casual audience members that'll go and end up watching this and be introduced to Pokemon for the first time. And I think that that's one thing I can say is one of the biggest accomplishment this movie has, is it does that very well. And I think that this movie is a good movie. I don't have too much more to say, guys. I think that this is a fun movie that has some great action and some great look and feel and vibe to the film. You know, some of the performances aren't great. The main actor, Tim, you know, there's a few moments in the film where I was not buying his performance, where it literally looked like he was acting. And I think a few of the other actors in this film, some of them that I don't even know their names, and they weren't even recognizable to me. You know, they were enjoyable, but they weren't really tugging at my heart the entire time. There was nothing really in the writing and their performances that really got me hooked to them as characters and at all. And so that's the biggest negative that I'll give this film for me, is just that I didn't get to feel super connected to the story because I feel like certain elements were rushed. And this movie is an hour and 44 minutes, and I really feel like they should have just stretched it out to that 2-hour mark. But I really feel like the extra 15 minutes of footage across the film really would have fleshed things out and made a few segments not feel as rushed as the film really did at times. There was a few moments where I felt like they kind of passed over a few things kind of quickly, and there were some convenient story moments where they kind of went to the place they needed to go to get what they needed to get, and they got it, no problem, no real issue. You know, maybe they kind of fumbled their way through it, but they got it, you know what I mean? And I feel like there wasn't as much conflict and any kind of complexity to the narrative that really made you feel like, oh snap, what's gonna happen next? I very much was just creating the last half of the film in my head as the movie went on. And it went, for the most part, pretty much to how I thought it would go. I think this is a good movie, guys. I think it's a lot of fun. I think that if you were a fan of Pokemon, that you will have a good time with it and you will enjoy it. But I think it's just good to know that you're going into a movie that's not the strongest narratively. You know, it's got a cohesive narrative. There's no real like huge plot holes or anything like that makes you feel like, oh my god, this is terrible. But yeah, the narrative is just a little basic and it's a little easy to just kind of predict. But for the most part, I think it's funny. I think it's fun. It's very well executed. There's some humor that doesn't work in the film sometimes, but I actually told my girlfriend when we were walking out that I felt like that was kind of, it kind of was true to Pokemon in that sense. You know, like even in some of the latest Pokemon games, you'll still play it and there's some of this just hokey, just cheesy comedy and humor that some of the dialogue has, or just little moments of body humor by some of the characters that the games have always really tapped into a very self-aware cheesiness. And I think that the film did a good job of grounding Pokemon and bringing a new vibe and feel to it, while also being true to the cheesiness and the campiness that Pokemon is and has. And I feel like they leaned into that. So that's why I can't hate on that too much, that some of the humor wasn't the funniest and some of it was kind of cheesy, because I do feel like that's kind of what they were going for, and it did feel very much in tone with Pokemon. And one last thing that I really want to talk about that just kind of like took me out of the film from time to time is, again, this movie is Pokemon. So there's times that things are really heightened and really over the top, and characters get through situations that are just like, wow, how did you get through that situation without even getting hurt at all? Who knows? But it's Pokemon, you know. It felt like a big cartoon in live action in a lot of times. And one thing that I just really couldn't get behind sometimes is that there were certain characters that would get hurt like really easily by like nothing happening, and then the main character and some other characters will do certain things that you're just like, oh my gosh, like you should be dead. There's a scene specifically, this is not really a spoiler at all, like I mentioned in all my reviews, I will not be spoiling. There's a scene where the main character has to jump a very far distance, and he's really high up, and you know, he makes it and he's fine. But if he would have been doing this in any sort of other live action film that was not Pokemon, we all would have called bullshit instantly and been like, what? Like, you should be dead. 100%. It felt like he felt like 50 to 70 stories, and I'm not making that up. Like, I'm not trying to be exaggerative. There's literally a scene in this movie, if you've seen it, you know what I'm talking about, where it felt like this guy fell like 100 bajillion stories. I'm going to say about a legitimate 40 to 50, 60 stories, and crash lands on the edge of this cliff, like right on his chest. I'm like, oh my god, dude, your ribs would have been shattered to pieces, you know what I mean? And then after that, not long after, they fall into this body of water from a very high distance, and there's all this stuff crashing around them. I'm just thinking, you would have been dead, you know? So there's times where the film feels grounded, where it's like, oh, the characters take a hit and it's like, oh my gosh, are they okay? And then stuff like that happens and you're like, okay, well then this is just this is just a cartoon at this point. And I think once you get your mind around the kind of film that this is, you can just kind of turn your mind off and just kind of enjoy it. Like I mentioned, the story isn't the strongest thing of all time, but I really did enjoy it. I think it's a lot of fun. I think if you are a fan of Pokemon, you will have a great time with this film. I think, like I said, the action, the look and the feel of this movie is awesome, and I think it's a great first live action Pokemon movie. There's a lot of heart and charm, specifically in the last like 20-30 minutes, and yeah, there was a nice genuine surprise that I wasn't expecting near the end of this film. My girlfriend Haley actually kind of already knew exactly where this film was going, and I think that leans more into the predictability of this film, right? Is I've never played the Detective Pikachu video game, which this film is actually based on. My girlfriend has, and she actually told me some of the story beats that happened in that game as she was playing it, and I know she ended up getting further in the game, and she knows how the game actually ended, so she already knew exactly how this movie was going to go, and it went almost exactly like she expected it to. Based on everything that she told me from when she was playing the game, I was watching this and thinking, wow, this is exactly what she told me this game was. So, you know, they do say at the very end during the credits that this film was based on that video game. So I think if you played that video game, you know, it is a bit of a bummer that this film is going to be incredibly predictable, because it seems like they took that basic structure of that story and just slapped it onto this movie with very little new twists and surprises, you know what I mean? But yeah, guys, I really did enjoy this movie. I do highly recommend it for Pokemon fans, and even if you're not a Pokemon fan, I think that, you know, there's a good chance you'll really like this movie. I think you should go in with subdued expectations. The story and the narrative is nothing super crazy or complex or even that compelling is really what I'll say. Compelling is the biggest thing that I was wishing it was. I just wasn't super gripped by the narrative, and my heart wishes that I was a little bit more entangled with the characters and what was happening with them. But it's okay, because I really did enjoy this movie and I do recommend it. It's a lot of fun. But I'm gonna stop rambling now, guys. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure you guys hit that like button down below. Let me know down below what you want to see out of the next Pokemon movie. I'm really excited. I'm gonna assume and hope that they will make another film after this, because they definitely left it open for more. And even if it doesn't follow these characters, I think they left it very open to just make more live action Pokemon films, and I want to see more of this universe in a live action format. And I'm super excited to hear what you guys have to say about this movie, so comment down below. Let me know what you thought about it if you've seen it. If you haven't seen it, let me know down below what you're most excited about to see in this movie. What is it that pulls to your heart? Are you a Pokemon fan? All that great stuff. I can't wait to see you guys in the next video. Thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure you guys hit that subscribe button, and I will see you guys in the next video. Pika Pika!